People in Power, and I'm Sama El-Shahat. On today's program, state-sponsored fear. After a decades-long war, Eritrea's president, Isaias Afwerki, led his country to independence from Ethiopia in 1991. But Afwerki remains convinced that Eritrea is still under threat of imminent invasion, that Ethiopia harbors ambitions to try and retake the strategic Red Sea coast. And if that happens, the rest of the world will not intervene. And as a result, the regime has kept the country on a permanent war footing, tolerating neither dissent nor opposition. Today, the president stands accused of isolating his country from the outside world and disappearing all who question his authority. Journalists are routinely imprisoned, and despite numerous promises, elections have never been held. It's very difficult to enter Eritrea on any kind of official basis. But journalist Sinead O'Shea and cameraman Scott Corbin travelled undercover to get this rare portrait of a country in the grip of a disturbing paranoia.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just landed in Asmara Airport.
Eritrea, home to one of the most secretive regimes in the world. According to Reporters Without Borders, this is the most dangerous country in the world for journalists. Using the most basic recording equipment and disguised as tourists, we have set out to observe Eritrean life. These are to be the first independent images of Eritrea in 8 years. On the surface, the capital Asmara is a pleasant place, with the more positive influences of Italy, its first colonizer, everywhere, from macchiatos to its Art Deco architecture. Muslims and Christians, each comprising almost 50% of the population, coexist peacefully. Tribal and religious unity are apparent. But we soon gain a sense of the other Eritrea, the one below the surface. Although we can't show you, we were constantly monitored. As a result, no one we did manage to speak to would do so on camera. We have also changed all their voices for their protection. We are not the only ones being watched. Communications are tightly controlled. Acquiring a mobile phone, for example, is no easy matter. In one phone shop, not the one shown here, we discover that everyone who wants a phone must go before a committee.
Anyone can get it. Yeah, I like it. You can or you can't? No, I can't. Oh, why not? Because it's not allowed for me.
Oh, why not?
Something.
The committee said no?
Like older people can get it.
Except for some of the people. Ben Rollins is a specialist on Eritrea with Human Rights Watch. We showed him our film when we returned to London. We've also changed all their...
Eritrean society is under the complete control of the government. People cannot move from their houses or their workplaces without permission. They can't even decide in most cases what job they do because people are conscripted from the age of 18 to 50. There are spies in schools, in the military, teachers spying on students, students spying on teachers, young recruits spying on their commanders in the military. Neighbours spying on their neighbours, people within your family informing on you.
Travel is difficult. At $2 per litre, it is the second most expensive place in the world to buy petrol. But that's okay, because nobody's allowed to travel anywhere. The government-run tourist office tells us that there are just 3 roads we are allowed to take in the entire country. Even this map is an unusual sight within Eritrea. For security reasons, they're not readily available.
We've been in Asmara 2 days now, and we finally have all the documents that we need to leave the city and see the rest of the country, or at least see the rest of the country that we're allowed to see. In the morning we're going to go to Massawa and have a look at the Red Sea coastline and see what the Eritreans fought so hard to keep. After that, we're going to go towards the Ethiopian border.
After yet more checkpoints, we eventually come to the port of Massawa, a once crucial target during the war with Ethiopia, but little has been done to develop it since independence. In fact, the only real development in this area lies a few miles outside. These beach scenes are a very incongruous sight in a country that is so obviously impoverished. But, according to a report by Human Rights Watch, it's far different out to sea. Here on the Red Sea coastline is where wealthy Eritreans come to play, but beyond the idyllic coastline lie the Dahlak Islands. This is where Eritrea's biggest prison is located, which is where some of the worst human rights abuses are taking place.
There is a massive clandestine network of prisons across Eritrea. One of the problems for human rights organisations is actually understanding where all those sites are and how many people are being held. In all of those places we're hearing accounts of torture, systematic extreme torture.
Although those who have fled the country have spoken out about these abuses, the atmosphere of intense watchfulness make it extremely difficult for Eritrean people to discuss this. Those we spoke to were very frightened and took a considerable risk in doing so. Once again, none of them could talk to us on camera.
I cannot go out. I cannot leave my workplace, even though it's not convenient for me. If I do that, I'll go to jail. They are very much frustrated. There is the area opposition parties on the one side, so the only thing is we should have to do what we must ask.
Do you know anybody who got in trouble?
Of course, very many.
Nobody is officially allowed to leave Eritrea. There is a shoot-to-kill policy at the border. Despite this, the country is one of the largest creators of refugees in the world, with thousands fleeing through the tough landscape every year. Eritrea is the youngest country in Africa and was once considered the continent's brightest hope, implementing democratic reforms and promoting an atmosphere of openness to the rest of the world. So what happened? It's all about history. After World War II and the collapse of Italy's empire, Ethiopia set its sights on reclaiming Eritrea and, crucially, its strategic Red Sea coastline. For most of the next 5 decades, Eritrea resisted in spectacular fashion. Although they did receive some aid from the Russians, they fought most of this war on their own. By any standards, their victory, led by Isaias Afwerki, now the president, and a vastly outnumbered army of men and women, was an extraordinary achievement.
I think the relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea is key to the current political situation, because that is the justification that the regime of Isaias Afwerki uses for its continued repression and its continued militarization.
3 more years of bloodshed followed, resulting in the deaths of 150,000 Eritreans. Once again, the international community was perceived to have done nothing to help. Since then, the country has been in a state of high alert, and the reformist structures which seemed so promising a decade ago have been abandoned. Conscription is compulsory until the age of 50. The militarization is highly visible, even during our limited journey, which eventually took us back into the interior and south. We are in Sanafi, which is about 25 kilometers from the Ethiopian border, and this is as far as we can go. All around us we can see the devastation that Eritreans experienced. We have to be very careful as we speak because there's a lot of people watching us here. There's a lot of soldiers around the place. Ethiopia is an important Western ally in the Horn of Africa. Due to the current crisis in Somalia, this is an especially troubled part of the world. Eritreans all share an absolute belief that if Ethiopia were to reinvade, just as before, they would be ignored, as a well-placed official and government supporter told us.
Do you really think Ethiopia is about to invade you?
They could come in. We have paid a price earlier. We have paid. I myself have paid my own price. And I don't want it to happen again to me because my children will lose their own father too.
And so all of Eritrea's money and energy is devoted to the military, whose feats are celebrated every night on TV. Meanwhile, people queue for food and beg on the streets. Thousands of people, including the president's former comrades and political colleagues, have disappeared for trying to do so. You are not an Eritrean if you critique Eritrea. You are a member of the elite and your motives aren't pure.